My name is Maya, and I am 26 years old. I still remember the exact moment when my cousin Bridget stood in front of 30 wedding guests and announced that I was too poor to afford a decent gift for her special day. The laughter that followed, the pitying looks from relatives, the smug satisfaction on my aunt's face as she patted Bridget's hand consolingly. They had no idea that sitting in a law office downtown was documentation of a trust fund worth $8.7 million, left to me by my late grandmother with strict instructions that I could not access it until my 27th birthday, just 3 months away. If you have ever been judged by people who think they know your financial situation, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button and stay for a story about the day my family's assumptions came crashing down around them. Growing up in the Morrison household meant understanding your place in the family hierarchy. My mother, Linda, was the youngest of 3 sisters, and from what I gathered from years of family gatherings, she had always been considered the disappointment. Where her sisters married well, my mother fell in love with my father, Daniel, a high school art teacher with more passion than financial prospects. Where her sisters settled in the affluent suburbs, my parents chose a modest apartment in the city so my father could be close to the public school where he taught. Where her sisters had elaborate weddings, my parents eloped to City Hall with 2 witnesses. My grandmother, Catherine Morrison, was a formidable woman who had built a successful commercial real estate empire from the ground up after being widowed young. She was practical, sharp, and valued hard work above all else. My mother's sisters, Patricia and Susan, had both married men who worked in my grandmother's company, ensuring their financial comfort and their continued favor in her eyes. My mother's choice to marry for love rather than security had created a rift that never fully healed. I came along 2 years after my parents married, and from my earliest memories, I was aware of being different from my cousins. Patricia's daughter, Bridget, was exactly my age, born just 2 months after me. Susan's children, Trevor and Melissa, were slightly older. They all lived in large houses with manicured lawns, attended private schools, and took exotic vacations. Meanwhile, I grew up in our 2-bedroom apartment, attended public school, and our family vacations consisted of camping trips and visits to free museums. But here is what my aunts and cousins never understood. I was happy. My parents filled our home with love, creativity, and intellectual curiosity. My father taught me to see beauty in everyday things, to appreciate art and music and literature. My mother, who worked as a hospital nurse, taught me compassion and the value of helping others. We might not have had money, but we had something my cousins seemed to lack, genuine warmth and connection. My grandmother saw this too. Despite the tension with my mother, Catherine made a point of spending time with me separately. Starting when I was 7, she would pick me up every other Saturday and take me to her office. While my cousins were at writing lessons or tennis clubs, I was learning about commercial leases, property management, and business negotiations. Maya, she would say, her sharp eyes studying me over her reading glasses, money is a tool, not a trophy. The people who wave it around like a flag are usually the ones who understand at least. Those Saturdays became sacred to me. My grandmother taught me about financial literacy, investing, and the importance of living below your means. She told me stories about growing up poor during the Depression, about building her business with nothing but determination and smart decisions. Your mother made a choice, she told me once when I was 12. She chose a rich life over a wealthy one. That takes courage. Her sisters chose security and comfort. Neither choice is wrong, but only one requires bravery. When I was 16, my grandmother sat me down in her office with a serious expression. I am updating my will, and I want you to understand what I am doing and why. She explained that she was dividing her estate among her 3 daughters equally, but that my inheritance would be structured differently. Instead of receiving it immediately upon her death, my portion would be placed in a trust that I could only access after my 27th birthday. I am doing this for 2 reasons, she said. First, I want you to build your own life, your own career, your own sense of self-worth before you have access to serious money. Second, I want to protect you from your family. That second reason made my stomach drop. Protect me? Your aunts and cousins have always looked down on you and your parents, she said bluntly. If they knew you were inheriting the same as them, they would either try to manipulate you into sharing it with them or make your life miserable out of jealousy. This way, by the time you can access the money, you will be old enough and established enough to handle whatever comes your way. She made me promise not to tell anyone, not even my parents, about the trust fund. Let them underestimate you, she said with a slight smile. It will serve you well. My grandmother passed away 6 months later from a sudden heart attack. She was 72. The funeral was a large affair, befitting a prominent businesswoman. I cried genuine tears, mourning not just her death, but the loss of those Saturday afternoons, those lessons, that unconditional acceptance. The reading of the will took place a week later. My aunts were shocked to learn that the estate was being divided equally among the 3 daughters. They had clearly expected my mother to receive less, given her estrangement from the family business. I do not understand, Aunt Patricia said, her voice tight. Linda has not been involved in the business for years. How can she possibly receive the same as those of us who have supported Mother's work? The lawyer, a stern man named Robert Blackwood, adjusted his glasses. These were Mrs. Morrison's explicit wishes. Each daughter receives 1/3 of the estate. What they did not know, and what I did not reveal, was that my portion was actually separate from my mother's inheritance. The trust fund in my name had been set up years earlier and was not part of the main estate division. My mother received her third, which amounted to about $4 million after taxes, and immediately used part of it to pay off their modest mortgage and set up college funds for me. The rest she invested conservatively, continuing to work as a nurse because she loved the job. My aunts, meanwhile, each received their portions and immediately upgraded their already lavish lifestyles. Bigger houses, luxury cars, designer wardrobes. Their children, my cousins, benefited as well. Bridget, who was finishing college at the time, received a downtown condo as a graduation gift. Trevor and Melissa each received new cars and sizable allowances. I was in my sophomore year at State University, having chosen to attend on a partial academic scholarship rather than burden my parents with private school tuition. I worked part-time at a campus bookstore and lived in a shared apartment with 3 roommates. My life was full of late-night study sessions, part-time job shifts, and cheap pasta dinners, and I was genuinely content. But my cousins saw my situation differently. At family gatherings, which became less frequent after my grandmother's death, they would make pointed comments about my student lifestyle and express exaggerated sympathy for my struggles. Bridget, in particular, seemed to take pleasure in the contrast between our circumstances. It must be so hard, she would sigh, living in that tiny apartment and having to work during school. I am so grateful I do not have to worry about money. I would smile and nod, remembering my grandmother's advice about letting people underestimate me. What Bridget did not know was that I was earning a 3.9 GPA in finance, had already secured a summer internship at a prestigious investment firm, and was being mentored by one of my grandmother's former business associates who saw potential in me. The years passed, and the family dynamic remained consistent. My aunts and cousins lived their affluent lives, while my parents and I continued in our more modest circumstances. I graduated with honors, landed a job as a financial analyst, and moved into a small studio apartment in a neighborhood that was up and coming, which is code for not yet gentrified. My cousins, meanwhile, had mixed results in their own careers. Bridget had gone through 3 different jobs in public relations, quitting each time she felt she was not appreciated enough. Trevor worked for my Aunt Patricia's portion of my grandmother's old company, a position he had clearly been handed rather than earned. Melissa had married a banker and become a stay-at-home wife, spending her days at boutique fitness classes and charity luncheons. Then came the engagement. Bridget had been dating Ashton, a corporate lawyer from a wealthy family, for 2 years. When they got engaged, it became the family's primary topic of conversation. Aunt Patricia was planning a wedding that would rival a royal affair, a historic venue, a designer dress, a guest list of 300 people. The engagement party was held at a country club, and I attended in my best work dress, a simple navy sheath I had bought on sale. Surrounded by people in obvious designer wear, I felt out of place, but tried to stay positive. I had brought a nice gift, a set of vintage crystal wine glasses I had found at an estate sale and had professionally cleaned and appraised. "Oh, how quaint," Bridget said when she opened my gift in front of a small group of relatives. "Very vintage chic. I am sure these came from a thrift store or something." "Actually, they are Baccarat crystal from the 1960s, I said evenly. "They were quite valuable." She gave me a patronizing smile. "Of course they are. Thank you, Maya. Every little bit helps." That phrase, "every little bit helps," would become a running theme over the next 6 months of wedding planning. I was included in the wedding party as a bridesmaid, more out of family obligation than genuine friendship. Bridget selected expensive bridesmaid dresses that required multiple fittings and alterations, all of which we were expected to pay for ourselves. When I quietly mentioned to my mother that the dress and related expenses were straining my budget, Bridget overheard and announced loudly, "Oh, Maya, if you cannot afford to be in the wedding, it is totally fine. I would understand if you needed to drop out." The implication was clear. My financial situation was embarrassing, both to me and to her. But I gritted my teeth and stayed in the wedding party, picking up extra freelance work to cover the costs. The wedding itself was scheduled for 2 months after my 27th birthday. This timing was coincidental, but it meant that I would have access to my trust fund before the wedding. However, following my grandmother's advice and my own instincts, I had decided not to reveal the trust fund to anyone, even after I could access it. I wanted to see how my life would unfold naturally, without the complicating factor of wealth. My 27th birthday passed quietly. I went to Robert Blackwood's office, signed the necessary paperwork, and gained full access to the trust fund. The amount, with years of compound interest and smart investments, had grown to $8.7 million. Robert, who had known my grandmother for decades, gave me a rare smile. "Your grandmother would be proud of you, Maya. You have built a solid foundation for yourself. This money will enhance your life, not define it." I thanked him and left the office, feeling surreal. I was a millionaire and nobody in my life knew. I went to work the next day in my usual subway commute, sat in my cubicle, ate my packed lunch, and went home to my studio apartment. For the time being, I wanted to maintain my routine and think carefully about what I wanted to do with this opportunity. 2 weeks after gaining access to the trust, the wedding drama reached new heights. Bridget had sent out her final guest list and was organizing seating arrangements. At a bridesmaid's brunch at an expensive restaurant, she pulled out a chart showing where everyone would sit. "I am putting Maya at table 18, she announced. "It is mostly Ashton's coworkers who we do not know very well." I figured since Maya is not as polished as the rest of you, she would fit in better there. The other bridesmaids, all friends of Bridget from her private school days, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even they seemed to think this was harsh. "Table 18 is basically the reject table," one of them, Simone, said carefully. "Are you sure?" "Well, where else would I put her?" Bridget replied. "The family tables are full, and she does not really fit in with my professional contacts. Besides, she should be grateful to be invited at all. I know weddings can be expensive for people on a budget." I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was reaching my limit. This constant condescension, this relentless emphasis on my supposed poverty, was becoming unbearable. But I reminded myself, just a few more weeks until the wedding, and then I could distance myself from this toxicity. The final straw came a week before the wedding. All the bridesmaids were expected to attend a spa day, followed by a gift opening party for Bridget. The spa treatments alone cost $400 per person, and we were expected to bring additional gifts to the party afterward. I had already spent close to $2,000 on bridesmaid duties, and while I could certainly now afford the spa day, I was feeling resentful about the entire situation. More importantly, I had a major work presentation the same day that could lead to a promotion. I called Bridget to explain that I could not attend the spa day due to work commitments, but I would see her at the gift party afterward. "Of course you have to work," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I forget that not all of us have the luxury of taking time off." "It is fine, Maya. We will miss you." The way she said, "we will miss you," made it clear that they would not miss me at all. But I said nothing, ended the call, and focused on my presentation. The presentation went brilliantly. My boss pulled me aside afterward to say that I was being considered for a senior analyst position, which would come with a significant raise and more responsibility. I felt proud and validated, a reminder that my career success had nothing to do with family money and everything to do with my own hard work. That evening, I went to Bridget's apartment for the gift opening party. I had bought a generous gift from their registry, a set of high-end cookware that cost $600. I figured this would be my final gift to them, and then I could move on from this toxic relationship. When I arrived, the atmosphere was clearly celebratory. The spa day had involved champagne, apparently a lot of it. Bridget and her friends were giggly and relaxed, showing off their manicures and glowing skin. "Maya," Bridget exclaimed when she saw me. "You made it. We were just talking about you." I smiled cautiously. "All good things, I hope." "Oh, of course," she said, though her smile had a sharp edge. "We were just saying how hard it must be for you, seeing all of us prepare for this wedding when you probably cannot even afford to think about getting married yourself." The room went quiet. Even her tipsy friends seemed to realize she had crossed a line. "Bridget," Simone said quietly. "That's not—" "What?" Bridget interrupted. "I am just being honest. I mean, look at her. She is wearing the same dress she wore to my engagement party. She works overtime just to afford being in this wedding. It is actually kind of sad." I felt my face flush, but I kept my voice steady. "I have different priorities than you, Bridget. That does not make my life sad." "Sure, priorities," she said, making air quotes. "That is what people say when they cannot afford things. Look, I am not trying to be mean. I am just saying it must be hard being the poor cousin." Something in me snapped. Not into anger, but into a calm, clear certainty. I was done protecting these people from their own prejudices. I was done playing small to make them feel big. "Actually, Bridget," I said calmly, "I am not poor. I have never been poor. I have simply chosen not to advertise my financial situation." She laughed, a harsh sound. "Right. Okay, Maya. If you're not poor, where is your trust fund? Where is your family money? Oh wait, you do not have any because your parents married for love instead of money. How romantic and broke." "My grandmother left me a trust fund," I said clearly. "I gained access to it on my 27th birthday 2 weeks ago. It is currently worth $8.7 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Bridget's smile froze on her face. Her friends stared at me in shock. Someone's champagne glass paused halfway to their lips. "You are lying," Bridget finally said, but her voice wavered. "I am not," I replied. "My grandmother set it up to protect me from exactly this kind of situation. She knew that if my aunts and cousins knew I was inheriting money, they would either try to take advantage of me or resent me for it. She was right." "If you have all this money," one of Bridget's friends asked incredulously, "why are you living in a studio apartment and taking the subway to work?" "Because having money does not mean I need to spend it frivolously," I said. "I enjoy my job. I like where I live. I do not need to prove my worth through material possessions." Bridget's face had gone from pale to red. "If this is true, why did not you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling?" "Because I was not struggling," I said. "You assumed I was struggling because I made different choices than you. You judged me based on your own narrow definition of success. And, honestly, your treatment of me has shown me exactly what my grandmother wanted to protect me from." "I need to see proof," Bridget demanded. "This is crazy. You are making this up to embarrass me." I pulled out my phone and called Robert Blackwood. It was after hours, but he had given me his personal number for emergencies. This qualified. "Robert, it's Maya Morrison," I said when he answered. "I apologize for calling so late, but I need you to confirm something. Can I put you on speaker?" I explained the situation briefly, and Robert, bless him, understood immediately. "To whom should I be confirming this information?" he asked. "My cousin and her friends. They think I am lying about my trust fund." "I see," Robert said, his voice taking on a formal tone. "To whom it may concern, I am Robert Blackwood, senior partner at Blackwood and Associates. I have served as the Morrison family attorney for 32 years. I can confirm that Maya Elizabeth Morrison is the sole beneficiary of a trust fund established by Catherine Morrison, which Maya gained full access to upon her 27th birthday. The current value of said trust is $8,734,621.47 as of yesterday's market close. If anyone requires formal documentation, they may contact my office during business hours. Maya, do you need anything else? No, thank you, Robert. I appreciate it. Your grandmother would be handling this situation with the same grace you are. Good evening. I hung up and looked at the stunned faces around me. Bridget looked like she might faint. I cannot believe, she finally whispered, that you let me look like an idiot. All this time, you were secretly rich, and you let me pity you. You pitted yourself, I corrected her. You used me to feel superior. That says more about you than it does about me. Get out, she said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. Get out of my apartment and out of my wedding. Gladly, I said. I set the wrapped cookware on her counter. Consider this my wedding gift. I hope your marriage is built on something more substantial than the need to feel superior to others. I left her apartment and walked home in the cool night air, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls, family members who had apparently been immediately informed of the drama, but I ignored them all. The next morning, I woke to dozens of messages. My mother had called 6 times. Aunt Patricia had left a voicemail demanding I call her immediately. Even Trevor and Melissa had sent texts ranging from shocked to congratulatory to accusatory. I called my mother first. She answered on the first ring. Maya, sweetheart, is it true? Did your grandmother really leave you a trust fund? Yes, Mom. I am sorry I did not tell you. Grandmom made me promise not to tell anyone until I was ready. There was a long pause. How much? She finally asked, her voice careful. After tax and with investments, about $8.7 million. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh, honey, that is life-changing money. It is, I agreed. But I did not want it to change my life before I was ready. I wanted to prove to myself that I could make it on my own. You did, she said firmly. You absolutely did. Your father and I are so proud of you. And your grandmother. She was so wise to protect you this way. What are Patricia and Susan saying? I asked. They are shocked, Mom said carefully. And a bit defensive. Patricia is upset that Bridget was embarrassed. Susan is calculating how this affects family dynamics. It is all very typical. Over the next few days, the family fallout intensified. Aunt Patricia called to yell at me for humiliating her daughter. I let her rant for 5 minutes before calmly stating that Bridget had humiliated herself through her own behavior, and then I hung up. Aunt Susan tried a different approach, calling to suggest that my grandmother had clearly wanted the cousins to be close, and perhaps I could help Bridget and Ashton with a down payment on a house as a wedding gift. I declined. Trevor sent a series of texts alternating between congratulations and hints that a startup loan would really help him break away from his mother's company. I did not respond. The most interesting response came from Bridget herself, 3 days after our confrontation. She sent a long email apologizing for her behavior and explaining that she had been under so much stress from wedding planning. She hoped we could move past this awkwardness and that I would reconsider being in her wedding. I did not respond to that either. The wedding took place as scheduled. I did not attend. Instead, I spent that Saturday volunteering at a financial literacy workshop for teenagers, teaching young people the money management skills my grandmother had taught me. That evening, as I was leaving the community center, my phone rang. It was Simone, one of Bridget's bridesmaids. Maya, I just wanted to call and apologize, she said. I have been watching how Bridget treated you for months, and I said nothing. I should have stood up for you. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. Why are you calling now? Because the wedding was miserable, she admitted. Bridget has been on edge all week, snapping at everyone. The ceremony was beautiful, but you could feel the tension. And honestly, several guests were talking about what happened, about how she treated you. It reflected poorly on her. I am sorry the wedding was not enjoyable, I said, and I meant it. Can I ask you something? Simone said. If you had all this money, why did not you just tell Bridget from the start? Would not that have prevented all of this? Maybe, I said. But it also would have changed the entire dynamic. She would have treated me differently, but not because she respected me as a person, only because she knew I was wealthy. I did not want relationships based on my bank account. That makes sense, Simone said quietly. For what it is worth, I think you handled everything with a lot more grace than most people would have. A week after the wedding, I received a formal letter from Aunt Patricia, written by her lawyer. It claimed that my grandmother's trust fund was improperly structured and should have been part of the main estate, therefore subject to division among all the grandchildren. It was clearly a desperate attempt to get access to my money. I forwarded the letter to Robert Blackwood, who responded within 2 hours with a detailed legal explanation of why the claim was baseless, along with a strongly worded letter to Aunt Patricia's attorney warning against frivolous litigation. That was the end of that particular attempt. Over the next several months, I made careful decisions about my new financial reality. I did not quit my job or make any dramatic lifestyle changes. Instead, I met with financial advisors and drew up a comprehensive plan for managing the trust fund responsibly. I kept working, but I did use some of the money to buy a small, beautiful condo in my favorite neighborhood. It was not ostentatious, but it had large windows, a small balcony, and space for a home office. I furnished it slowly and thoughtfully, choosing pieces I genuinely loved rather than what I thought I should buy. I also established a charitable foundation in my grandmother's name, focusing on financial education for underprivileged young women. It felt right to honor her legacy by sharing the knowledge she had given me. My parents were wonderfully supportive. They did not ask me for money, though I quietly paid off the remainder of my father's student loans from his graduate degree, and I set up a fund for their retirement. They accepted these gifts with grace and gratitude, but continued living their normal lives. My relationship with my extended family essentially ended. Aunt Patricia sent a few more attempts at reconciliation, all of which were thinly veiled attempts to gain access to my money or to get me to invest in various schemes. I declined politely and eventually stopped responding. Bridget's marriage lasted 18 months. According to family gossip that reached me through my mother, she and Ashton fought constantly about money. She had expected to maintain her lavish lifestyle after marriage, but Ashton's lawyer salary, while good, could not support her spending habits. They divorced, and Bridget moved back in with Aunt Patricia. I might have felt sympathy for her if she had not sent me a text during her divorce asking if I could loan her money to get back on my feet. I did not respond. Through all of this, I kept working, kept learning, kept building relationships with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I had. I met someone, a fellow volunteer at the financial literacy program named Dominic, who was a social worker with a passion for helping at-risk youth. He knew nothing about my trust fund when we started dating, and when I eventually told him, his reaction was perfect. "That is great, Maya. Good for you. Now, do you want to split this pizza or what?" 2 years after gaining access to my trust fund, I had built a life I was genuinely proud of. I had been promoted to senior analyst. My charitable foundation had helped over 300 young women learn financial management skills. I had invested wisely and grown my wealth while also using it to make a meaningful difference. Most importantly, I had learned that my grandmother's greatest gift was not the money itself, but the wisdom she had shared with me. She had taught me that wealth without character is meaningless, that true security comes from within, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. I thought about her often, especially on Saturday afternoons when I volunteered at the financial literacy workshops. I imagined what she would say about how everything had turned out, and I could almost hear her voice. "Money is a tool, not a trophy. You are using yours well." The final chapter in the family drama came on what would have been my grandmother's 75th birthday. I hosted a small memorial gathering at a park she had loved, inviting only my parents and a few of her former business associates who had remained friends. Aunt Patricia heard about it, I assume from one of those business associates, and showed up uninvited with Susan in tow. They approached me as I was setting out flowers near a bench my grandmother had donated to the park years ago. "Maya," Patricia began, her voice stiff. "We wanted to talk to you about Mother. About her legacy." "Okay," I said carefully. "We think it would be appropriate if you contributed to a memorial fund in her name," Susan said. "Something at the country club or the business association. Something befitting her status." "I have already established a charitable foundation in her name," I replied. It provides financial education to young women. I think that is what she would have wanted. That is not the same as a proper memorial, Patricia insisted. A scholarship fund or a named building would be more appropriate. We were thinking you could fund it since you have the means. I looked at my aunts, these women who had judged my mother for marrying for love, who had raised children to value status over substance, who were now trying to use my grandmother's memory as leverage to get money from me. No, I said simply. No? Patricia repeated, shocked. Maya, this is about honoring your grandmother. My grandmother is honored every time a young woman learns to manage her money wisely and build a life of independence, I said. She is honored every time someone values financial literacy over financial showmanship. She is honored in the choices I make every day to use wealth as a tool for good rather than a weapon or a trophy. If you want a memorial that honors her, I suggest you reflect on the values she actually held and the lessons she tried to teach all of us. I turned away from them and walked back to my parents and the small group of people who had genuinely known and respected my grandmother. Behind me, I heard Patricia and Susan leaving, their heels clicking sharply on the park path. My mother came up beside me and took my hand. Your grandmother would be very proud of you, she said softly. I hope so, I replied. I am trying to live up to her example. You already have, sweetheart. You already have. As the afternoon sun filtered through the trees and we shared stories about the remarkable woman who had shaped my life in so many ways, I felt a deep sense of peace. The money had been a gift, certainly, but the real inheritance had been the wisdom, the perspective, and the unshakable sense of self-worth that my grandmother had instilled in me. I did not need my family's approval or respect. I had something far more valuable. I knew who I was and what I stood for. And no amount of money could buy that, and no amount of mockery could take it away. If you have ever been underestimated by people who thought they knew your story, share your experience in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who judged you based on appearances? How did you find the strength to stay true to yourself? Hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family drama and finding your own path. Remember, your worth is not determined by others' opinions, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stay true to your values while others underestimate you. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to trust yourself even when others doubt you.